This podcast is supported by Talkspace.
When my husband came home from his military deployment, readjusting was hard for all of us. Thankfully, I found Talkspace.
Talkspace provides professional support from licensed therapists and psychiatric providers online. Military members, veterans, and their dependents ages 13 and older can get fast access to providers, all from the privacy of their computers or smartphones.
I just answered a few questions online, and Talkspace matched me with a therapist. We meet when it's convenient for me, and I can message her anytime. It was so easy to set up, and they accept TRICARE. Therapy was going so well, my husband and I started seeing a couples therapist through Talkspace too.
Talkspace works with most major insurers, including TRICARE. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com/military. Go to Talkspace.com/military to get started today. That's Talkspace.com/military.
Well, hello, and welcome to September. Almost feels wrong to say that. This is the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Allstrands. Hope you're having a fantastic day, and just like that, September's here. It just seems like yesterday that we were looking out the window, watching the leaves start to bud out on the trees, and we're looking forward to that summer season. Now, I don't want to be all doom and gloomy about September. It is my favorite time of the year. September and October are my two favorite months in Nova Scotia. We get a chance to see some of the fall colors if we get any this year, and the temperatures kind of start to get to where they're more comfortable, although yesterday and I think today and tomorrow are going to be a little bit steamy, but it certainly is beautiful start to September when it comes to the weather. I know we're looking for rain, and it looks like, it's going to be fairly dry, so unfortunately there's that. Thanks to Vanessa Vandenez on the other side of the glass, as always, doing a fantastic job. I went for a walk in the woods over the weekend. After Friday, the Premier did the right thing and loosened some of the restrictions. Not for all. In fact, about half of the province remains under the woods ban, but I think it was wise to open the areas that saw some rain. Now, I did see several people out on the trails this weekend. Many of them were pretty happy to be there. But we can't lose sight of the big picture. The Long Lake wildfire continues to burn out of control, and there are still people out of their homes this morning. I think it's just over 85 square kilometers in size. Now, I came to work all rested and ready to go after being able to go out and get some as I like to call it, pine tree therapy, and was just kind of everything was lining up nice, and I was just ready, very happy to be back after a couple of days off. And then this crossed my desk. I don't know if you have seen this as of yet, but this from Nova Scotia Power this morning. It says, after nearly 6 months of discussions, Nova Scotia Power and customer representatives have reached a proposed settlement on power rates for the next 2 years. That's 26 and 27. Now, if approved by the Nova Scotia Energy Board, that used to be the UARB, overall average rates will increase across all customer classes by 2.1% in 26 and 2.1% in 27. Now, it gets worse from there, folks. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Those rates to be effective January 1st of each year. Now, residential rates, that's the rate that you and I pay for the privilege of having lights and a fridge and a stove and all the things, the washer and dryer that run off of electricity. Residential rates are expected to increase by 4.1% in both 26 and 27. So 26, 27 will see an 8.2% increase over those 2 years, 4.1 each year. The Nova Scotia Energy Board will make a final determination on rates for each customer group. The quote from Nova Scotia Power is this: the settlement is the result of strong collaboration and engagement with customer representatives who work on behalf of customers across Nova Scotia. We appreciate the time and effort that has gone into discussions over the last several months to strike a critical balance of affordability while continuing to invest in the grid to ensure customers have service they can count on. And as you are scratching your head trying to figure all of this out, as was I this morning when I sat down behind my computer screen and started to try and figure out what exactly this means. So I reached out for a couple of reasons to Nova Scotia Power. One, to ask somebody from the utility to come on to the program and do an interview with me this morning, and that was politely denied. They said that we aren't doing interviews today. So we will continue to try and have someone from Nova Scotia Power join us here on the show and explain these increases to us. Now, if you're curious about what these different numbers are, as I was, I asked for a little clarification on this so that it was be clear so I could give you some good information. Now, the 2.1% that I mentioned earlier across all customer classes, that's an average, right? Nova Scotia Power has a ton of different customer classes: light industrial, commercial, residential. There's a bevy of them. So they took the increases across each of those customer classes and averaged it out, and it's 2.1% per year over the next 2 years for 2.2%. Now, one of those customer classes is you and I, and that is the residential customer rate. And you and I, if this is approved by the Nova Scotia Energy Board, will see a 4.1% increase next year in 26 and a 4.1% increase in 27. I'm sure you'll have lots to say about that when we open up the telephone lines as part of the Monday. It's not Monday anymore, Dan. I almost said Monday Meltdown. It's the Tuesday open hour. We're going to do that after 11 o'clock today. I hope that you will join us and get your calls in early so that you're not disappointed as we do the open hour as we normally do. Back to school week this week, right? I know we've been talking about that for a couple of days. It's not normal, to say the least, for university students, particularly at Dalhousie University. As you heard on the news this morning, there's some students are out of class today. There are some classes going ahead that are being taught by people that aren't in the DFA. But just a lot of confusion. I was out at a local coffee shop on the weekend listening to students have discussions about it, and I think the word that reigned supreme with them was confusion, and I think there was probably some consternation there as well, as this is could be an important year. Well, it's always an important year when you pay for something to go to school and you aren't the service is denied to you, right? But I know there are some third-year and fourth-year students that are really concerned because if this thing goes on for any length of time, they are at risk at not graduating. And the reason why I say third term is there are some accelerated programs at Dalhousie now to get people out into the workforce quicker, particularly in, I think it's the nursing program. And they are accelerated to begin with. So when every day they lose is every day every student loses is bad, but when you're in an accelerated program, it hurts that much more. So there's a lot of consternation within the student population over at Dalhousie University. I would imagine there's some consternation within the faculty association as well. I don't think they like to be out on the sidewalk picketing, and I know they'd rather be inside the classroom, and I know there is some consternation within the Board of Governors at the university. My advice to you is to just get back to the table. We're not going to solve anything by ringing bells and shaking signs and digging our heels in. These things get negotiated at a table. So let's hope that these two parties get back together sooner rather than later, and we can solve this labor dispute and everybody can get back to normal. Downtown was certainly a vibrant place this weekend, wasn't it? It's fun. Back to school for me was always just terrible. Right, I wasn't an academic student. I didn't really do well in school, and getting off of that summer routine and going back to school, particularly in the post-secondary world, was always just a downer for me. But since I moved to Halifax and have been working here at the radio station, I try to get downtown or into the north end or around the Commons or right into the downtown core during this Labor Day weekend-ish. And you can feel a change with all of the students that are coming in and the youthful exuberance, I will call it. Vanessa's laughing at me. That happens when school starts. Parents are always very, very quick to write to me that their student comes to university and is digging into those books, and it's a job for them, and they're gonna the nose to the grindstone, all of those cliches that you can find, and they're not going to partake in that other part of it. But I think that other part of it is part of going to university, as long as you do it sensibly, right? And you're smart about it and you're safe about it. It's part of the experience. And I know there's a lot of you that are smiling right now because you've all been through it. And the part about it, when I talk to parents about it, and I know I'm using a broad brush here, but the part about it when I talk to parents is they did it when they were in university. But their kids aren't going to do that. Come on. Frosh Week is Frosh Week. Will always be Frosh Week, right? But again, I will reiterate that we hope that you're sensible about things. We hope that you're safe about things. Enjoy it. University goes by so quickly, and you're going to make life. I know that I'm starting to sound like the dad giving the speech before somebody left for school, but you're gonna make all kinds of friends, and it's all part of this. This is how you learn how to function in the wider world once you get out of university, by having these experiences. So welcome to Halifax if I haven't already seen you, because I saw a bunch of you on the weekend. And just pace yourselves. That's all I have to say about that. We've got a busy show planned for you here on a Tuesday after a long weekend. We're going to, of course, welcome back to the program afternoon today Dr. Rob Thacker, who is also getting ready for school. We will open up the science files. So if you've got any science-related questions to ask the good doctor, this is going to be a great opportunity. He was off last week, so we missed him, but he is back. And he is, of course, over at St. Mary's. That's Dr. Rob Thacker with Science Files. I mentioned 11 o'clock today. We're going to open up the telephone lines, and I'm sure you're going to want to comment on Nova Scotia Power. It's not good news, folks. It really isn't good news. We're looking at 8.2% in residential power rate hikes beginning next year. 26, 4.1, 27, 4.1. Your thoughts on nobody's going to like an increase. But I really want you to think about it. And I really want to hear from you about your what you're getting for your money. I mean, we have to have power, right? We can't function in 2025 without electricity. But are you getting a good bang for your buck? That'll be part of the open hour. So I hope that you can join us and have a discussion about that. I mentioned that it is back to school. We're going to stop. We're going to take our first break here on the program. And when we come back, we're going to have a conversation with the Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development for the province of Nova Scotia. That's Brendan Maguire. This is the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Olstrand. We are back in minutes. All right, welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Olstrand here on a Tuesday. Get it through your thick head, Dan. It's Tuesday. It's not Monday, and it is the Tuesday after a long weekend. And I know that it's traditionally back to school for some, back to school week for most, as parents get their kids ready to head out the door at various times, depending on which board you're in and which level of education your child is in the province. But it is that time of year again. And as always, when we start to open up the schools, there's always questions to be asked and hopefully be answered, and we hope to get some answers from our next guest, and that is the Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development for the province of Nova Scotia. That's Brendan Maguire, and he joins us on the phone. Brendan, how are you?
Good, Dan. How are you doing? How was your weekend?
It was good. I got to go out in the woods.
Yeah, wasn't that nice? I took the dog and the kids out, and it's nice to be back in the woods, and hopefully we continue with some wet weather and, things stay safe.
Now, I know that in my neighborhood has been busy this week of lots of school-age kids in the neighborhood, and they were all getting ready for back to school this week. And as I mentioned in the preamble, it varies depending on where you go and what level you're at. But this week is back to school week in Nova Scotia. And as I understand it, the province is ready to add 1,200 new spaces for the before and after school childcare program. I guess the first question, are we going to get to that number this year?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So 1,200 new spaces for more than 4,000 total. It's also 21 new schools, so we're going to be at more than 100 schools. This is a need, and it allows parents to continue with their workday, and also allows children, especially with the before and after school programs, right in the school. They don't have to be bused to after school programs, and they can just continue on with their day. So we're really excited, and a lot of hard work has gone into this.
Brendan, a lot of parents tell me that it's really difficult to find care for their kids before and after school. With this addition, do we have enough, or are you still looking for more?
Yeah, we're still looking for more. We just did a needs assessment, and that allowed us to add 1,200 more spaces. We're going to do another needs assessment in January. We're always continuing to looking to expand, and for us, we know that childcare is one of the most important things for families, both from an economic standpoint and also just from having that good, affordable childcare there. So the assessment is ongoing, and we'll do another needs assessment in January, and work from there.
We know the population's growing, Brendan, and talking to parents over the weekend who are getting their kids ready for school, there's some concern that the classrooms will be jammed full of kids, maybe even overcrowded. Do we have enough? Do we have enough spaces for the students that we're going to get this year?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, HRM in particular, but Nova Scotia has grown in population. It's grown in populations just since my children have gone to school. And, we're making massive investments in our schools, over $1 billion in new schools and constantly renovating the schools. So it is a pressure that we definitely have on the education system, but we're responding to it. And, I don't foresee any overcrowded schools, but we're going to keep an eye on it for sure.
About teacher resources, I know that time is sometimes a struggle as we get into the first weeks of school.
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to say, we're in the process of, in different stages of, we've announced 19 new schools. So, we are responding to the demand. We know there's more to do. As for the teachers, first of all, I just want to thank them. Hopefully the students and the teachers and all the staff had some time to unwind over the summer and get, the new year is always filled with optimism and hope, and I'm very proud of all the work they do. I think the code of conduct and the lunch program are two huge things for teachers going into the school year. We're expanding the lunch program to junior high level, and we know that kids learn better when they're not hungry. So we're investing in the resources that the teachers need, and we'll continue to listen to them.
School lunch program you mentioned, Minister, is being expanded this year. Tell me about the cost associated with expanding that into junior high.
So we're looking at it's total about $80 million. It's less about, to be honest with you, Dan, and I say this to people all the time, it's less about the financial impact. It's more about the educational, social impact for these students. Again, we know that students they do. They learn better when they're not hungry, and it's very difficult to go to school when you are hungry. So, and also we did listen to, I will say this proudly, we listened to the students. Last year was the first year of this massive rollout of the lunch program. We did hear some complaints, so we did adjust over the summer. We did some research and some focus groups that were children-led. And I can proudly say that the menu will be changing this year. It'll be much better, and we've even included chicken nuggets. So I know in my family, when I told my kids that, there was some cheers, and pizza on pizza crust, which will be a big change this year. So I suspect that the lunch program and the changes we made are going to be a big hit this year. And
that was my next question. There was some complaints about the menu last year and some dietary needs maybe outweighing other things, but it sounds that you'd like at least there's a bit of a change coming this year.
Yeah, I mean, it is a pretty big change. So what we did last year was the first year that we rolled out the lunch program. It was a heavy lift, and I want to thank the staff here at the Department of Education and our vendors, and also all the teachers and the support staff at the schools. It was a big lift. And we're expanding again to the junior high. But we heard loud and clear from students of what they did like and what they didn't like, and what was wrong, and where they felt there's some adjustments that need to be made. And so we're making those adjustments, and the standards for the lunch have changed, and it's a higher standard. We want to make sure that when kids get lunches that it's as warm as possible and as fresh as possible. So these are things that we're working on, and we've worked on with our vendors, and they're very well aware of what we need and what we want. And ultimately, you can have a lunch program, but if the kids aren't eating it, then what is a lunch program? So, we've made the menu changes and the quality changes, and really looking forward to see the reaction from the kids.
You mentioned higher standard, Brendan. Do you bring new vendors in, or have they added resources, or what's that going to look like for the kids this year?
Yeah, there was a pretty rigorous competition for vendors again this year, and we did bring some new vendors in. There was, one or two vendors that we're no longer using. And again, like there are standards that we expect to be met. 99.99% of them during the last round have met or will meet them. And so, again, like this is about making sure that the quality and the quantity of food that we put in front of children. Listen, it's not an easy thing. I have 3 children, and I can put the same meal in front of them one day and they'll eat it, the next day they won't like it. So, we just want to make sure that the quality and the quantity of food we put in front of the children are something they'll like. And again, like they'll see some changes in the lunch program with taters and baked taters and some chicken nuggets, baked healthy chicken nuggets, and I think it'll go a long way.
Would you eat it?
Listen, I was eating last stuff, so that was a headline, and I think last time I said that, Dad, my kids would bring the stuff home, and I like a good bean burrito, so I would eat it, but I will say the only thing I will not eat is cauliflower, so as long as it doesn't have cauliflower, I'm good to go.
So there's no cauliflower on the school menus, that according to the education minister.
No, that's not because of me, but no, there's not.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Brendan, another concern that parents always have at this time of the year, and I know it's almost impossible to answer, but it's the school busing question. Is every kid going to get picked up and delivered to school when they go back this week?
Yeah, I'm confident. I can tell you that last year under the previous Minister of Education was probably one of the best I've seen in my career as MLA. The RCEs did an exceptional job. The Regional Centre for Education, they did an exceptional job. There's a lot of ongoing learning and things like that. But we've talked to all of the RCEs. I've talked to all of the executive directors and people in charge of busing with the RCEs, and they're very confident. Obviously, there's times where things happen, but we will adjust to those things quickly. But what I can say is that I have a lot of confidence. They did an exceptional job last year, and they've assured me that this year will be no different.
You mentioned 19 schools are being built, Minister Maguire. Those things don't happen overnight. Do we have enough space now before these schools open so that we don't see an overcrowding issue?
Yeah, so the Regional Centers for Education have done a great job of managing this. What I would say to a lot of people is the modulars that are being put on school grounds are not the modulars of when I went to school. In some cases, in a lot of cases, the modulars that are being installed are as good as any school out there. So, we realize that these are short-term solutions while we build. But the truth is that we are building for a growing population, and the modulars are a short-term solution. And I would have anybody that has a little bit of apprehensive about the modulars, I'd tell them to check it out. I mean, these are beautiful things that have been done while we wait for the 19 schools to be built.
Busy time for you, Minister, I imagine. Yeah. I appreciate yours. Have a great day.
You too, sir, and enjoy this beautiful day.
And no broccoli.
And
cauliflower.
Can I just say
sure.
All the teachers and staff and principals and students, and I hope you have an incredible year.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Dan. Bye.
That is the Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development, Brendan Maguire, who says the school food program has been changed this year after some concerns were raised, I'll say, last year about it. Some of the kids didn't like it, wouldn't eat it. They've made some changes to it. I understand that chicken nuggets are going to be on the menu this year, and hopefully the minister says that this will help to alleviate some of those concerns, just as long as there's no cauliflower on the menu, because the minister won't even eat the cauliflower. So there you have it. And 19 schools being built, and I know I had conversations this weekend with people that are concerned about overcrowding. But we'll keep our eye on that. We will keep an eye on teacher resources. I know that those get a little bit strained at the beginning of the year when everybody tries to figure things out. We'll keep our eyes on all of that stuff right here on the Todd Veinotte Show as we move forward. We're going to stop. We're going to take a break for the news. On the other side of it, we got into the woods this weekend, but that ban has had an impact on businesses that rely on people walking on trails. And one of them is Cavicchi's Meats down there on the South Shore. Well, not the South Shore, down there in towards Lunenburg County. And we're going to see what that ban meant for business. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes.
This podcast is supported by Talkspace.
When my husband came home from his military deployment, readjusting was hard for all of us. Thankfully, I found Talkspace.
Talkspace provides professional support from licensed therapists and psychiatric providers online. Military members, veterans, and their dependents ages 13 and older can get fast access to providers, all from the privacy of their computers or smartphones.
I just answered a few questions online, and Talkspace matched me with a therapist. We meet when it's convenient for me, and I can message her anytime. It was so easy to set up, and they accept TRICARE. Therapy was going so well, my husband and I started seeing a couples therapist through Talkspace too.
Talkspace works with most major insurers, including TRICARE. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com/military. Go to Talkspace.com/military to get started today. That's Talkspace.com/military.
Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. I mentioned off the top of the program today that we managed to get back in the woods, at least in half of the province this weekend. The Premier announcing late on Friday that the woods ban would be lifted for a number of counties, including Halifax County, but areas like Lunenburg County and areas to the west and to the south, and of course in the fire zone where Long Lake is, we're still under the woods ban yesterday. So a partial ban. I know that many of you here in HRM managed to get out into the woods this weekend after being shut down for almost a month. And I saw many people out enjoying the trails in HRM, the ones that were closed this weekend. And I know that it was a welcome relief for many. Not only with those that were on the trails this weekend, but those that have businesses very close to the trails, I would imagine also breathing a bit of a sigh of relief. If you've ever been down St. Margaret's Bay Road, you've seen a couple of businesses there that are literally right on the edge of the St. Margaret's Bay Trail and St. Margaret's Bay Road, of course. And one of those two businesses is Cavicchi's Meats, and we're very pleased to welcome to the program today to give us a little bit of perspective on what this ban meant is Vanessa Cavicchi Downey, who joins us on the phone. How are you?
Hey, I'm great. How are you?
I am well. So let's give, for people that don't know what I'm talking about here, Vanessa, tell me how close your business is to the St. Margaret's Bay Trail.
Yeah, of course. So we are on a St. Margaret's Bay Road in Upper Tantallon, and our property is on the trail. Basically, it butts against the trail. So we actually maintain kind of the grass and the benches and the trees along the trail. So we're right beside the bike and beam that's there as well.
It's the old train station.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Vanessa, tell me a little bit about what the last month has been like that when we were unable to use the St. Margaret's Bay Trail.
Oh, it's been really quiet. Kind of in an eerie way, to be honest. It kind of felt like back in the pandemic days early on. So yeah, we haven't seen the foot traffic and the biking traffic, which, for a couple of weeks we thought, okay, well, we can kind of manage, with things being quieter and not as many people around. But then as the weeks went on, we really noticed how much it was impacting our business.
How much business do you get from people walking on the trail? Do you get a lot?
So, now that we've really kind of drilled it down and looked a lot closer, it's about 50% in the summer.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's a significant portion.
Yeah.
Obviously, now that the trails are reopened, a bit of a sigh of relief?
Yeah, I mean, it feels great. I think overall the most kind of impactful piece is just like everyone's mood. Certainly we've, been very lucky. We have lots of people in the community that have been around and supporting us. But just, this past weekend, I mean, we definitely weren't prepared, which is okay. But, the end of the summer, most small businesses have a lot less staffing and they open the trails and we were like, okay, well, let's go.
Kind of came at the last minute. The Premier didn't announce it until like 3:30 on Friday afternoon.
Yeah. So, I mean, everybody was already away for the long weekend, and we said, okay, well, we're just going to do the best we can and, be grateful that people can be out and about, and it was great. There was a lot of people around, and our staff are amazing, and, they just kind of showed up, and we did the best we could.
Now, many are asking, well, you're a meat shop. Well, why would somebody come off the trail? But you offer things for people that they can eat, right?
Yeah, the name is deceiving. So it's Cavicchi's Meats, but that's, kind of started, more than 15 years ago as like a wholesale business. So it's smoked sausage and pepperoni and bacon and things. But so we opened up a small retail shop in our family homestead. But then it's kind of morphed into a licensed restaurant and a place to get ice cream and sit on the patio. And because we're beside the trail, it really lends itself to a space for people to kind of stop and have a pit stop and get something to eat and hang out. So, over the years, it's really like our business has become dependent on the trail, to be honest.
50%. That's a big chunk, right?
Mm-hmm.
With that loss of business for 30 days, Vanessa, what obviously going to damage the business, but you're still okay, right?
We're okay. I appreciate the question. It's a bit complicated, to be honest, because the pandemic coupled with our own wildfires that significantly impacted our business a couple of years ago, and things were closed then as well. And then the trail being kind of on top of it, we're working on looking at, changing our business model, not entirely, but, we have to make some things a bit more fail-safe, to be honest with you, because, things are just so unpredictable. It's really difficult.
Well, we still have a lot of fall season, and hopefully, people will get out and support local businesses that were impacted by this ban.
Yeah, and they have been, and we're so grateful. We were overwhelmed, honestly, even like people communicating online, just saying, we appreciate you, we're glad you're here, kind of keep it up sort of thing. It makes a big difference when things are difficult.
We hope that everybody can get out there and get a sausage.
Yeah, thanks so much. I appreciate you calling.
Have a fantastic day, Vanessa.
You too. Enjoy the sun.
All the best.
Take care. You too.
That is Vanessa Cavicchi Downey from Cavicchi Meats out there on St. Margaret's Bay Road. I know that I saw an article, I think it was on the CBC, with their neighbor from the Bike and Bean, which I have been to many times, in the old train station there. If you've never been, it's really cool. It's the old train station on the old railway. It's a cafe, and you can get coffee there. You can walk across the street. If you've not had Cavicchi Meats before, I can tell you that their sausages are really good. They're really good, and I'm hungry. Anyway, when we don't often think about businesses because it's a trail, right? And you think, well, people are going to put a backpack on. They're going to hike. They're going to have a sandwich when they're wherever they're to, and they're going to turn around. But this one is literally right on the St. Margaret's Bay Trail. Like the back goes right onto the trail. So there's bicyclists and hikers and runners and walkers and such, and losing that flow of business for almost a month, it certainly would have an impact. And we know that local businesses here are resilient. We know that local businesses here will weather the storms, but as she said, Vanessa said, they had the Tantallon wildfire a couple of years ago. Then we had the crazy that was the pandemic, and now this. It seems that our small businesses that are related to the outdoors here have been just taking a bit of a beating as of late. So I'm hoping that if you're thinking of something to do this fall, maybe when the colors change and you want to go out and take a drive or a walk to go and take in the splendor of Nova Scotia, then maybe you'll stop by some of these businesses that have been impacted by this. I know there's some hiking stores that are hurting now because people just stopped. I mean, we couldn't do it, right? So, and I truly hope that the Premier keeps a very close eye on the weather conditions for the rest of the province. I know that there's some businesses down in Lunenburg County and in Kings, and you know what I mean. They're all hurting right now because they are seeing a lack of people, and hopefully Mother Nature will cooperate and we'll get some rain and we can put this fire season behind us. But of course, without saying anything more, very important to remember that the Long Lake wildfire remains out of control. It's 85 square kilometers in size. There are still people that are out of their homes. There are people who have lost their homes, and I don't want to lose sight of that. I don't want to lose sight of the work that the firefighters are doing to fight that blaze, and just the absolute tragedy that some families are facing right now in Nova Scotia. We are all thinking about you, and we're all willing to help. I think I can speak for many Nova Scotians when I say that. Time now to stop and take another break here on the program. On the other side of that break, we were speaking about firefighters, some that are actually on the fire line, saying that this season has them feeling a little bit ill-equipped. The president of the Atlantic Province's Professional Firefighters, Joe Triff, will be our guest. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes.
Thanks.
Hey, welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. Glad you're with us here on a Tuesday morning as we get back to business after a long weekend. Of course, many of us keeping our eye on the ongoing wildfire situation in the province of Nova Scotia, with a particular close look at the ongoing wildfire at Long Lake. And it's continuing to burn out of control, folks. It's not any change. They're working every single day on it from sun up to sundown, and it's not growing in size, but it certainly is not under control yet. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that are doing a lot of really hard work on that fire, trying to stop it from consuming any more woodlands and, of course, any more houses or properties out there. And we know the wildfire season can continue here for some time, depending on if we get any rain or not. So you can imagine that firefighting resources are a bit stretched these days because of this unprecedented, it's being called, wildfire situation in the province of Nova Scotia. This from the Global News website. Wildfire season across Atlantic Canada is being called unprecedented by many fire officials in the region. Joe Triff is the president of the Atlantic Province's Professional Firefighters, and he says no new deployment policies, no protocols, no new hands-on training, and we're further behind because we have issues with the personally protective equipment, or PPE. He says progress is needed to ensure fire like the one that hit Tantallon in 2023 doesn't happen again. And he says he believes this season's wildfires have exposed that. We're very pleased to welcome to the program the aforementioned president of the Atlantic Province's Professional Firefighters, and that is Joe Triff. Joe, how are you?
Good, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Oh, very, very glad that you're able to take some time out and join us. I can't even imagine how tired the firefighting crews are, particularly those that have been fighting fires for a month or month and a half.
Yeah, the crews in Long Lake have got to be tired. We don't have any members down there right now, but we've obviously had experience with Tantallon and Susie Lake this year, and other large-scale fires around Atlantic Canada, and we know how difficult that work can be. So we're hoping everybody's taking care of themselves.
The article says the Susie's Lake fire was an example of us, and that being the firefighters not doing better. Can you explain that to me? Like, was it that? I mean, it seemed to get knocked down fairly quickly, but it certainly did. It expose you?
Yeah, we've got some pretty deep frustrations with the current fire chief in Halifax. Our management team was aware of an issue with our personal protective equipment going back to April, and chose to ignore it, delay responding to our formal concerns, and push the issue into wildfire season. When Susie Lake Fire kicked off, we had a significant number of our members that weren't provided the appropriate personal protective equipment, the coveralls that we wear, into wildland fires to effectively fight that fire. there was a post-incident analysis done after Tantallon, which were well over 2 years past. And based on those recommendations from that post-incident analysis, which we felt was very rinsed of criticism, we don't have new equipment. We don't have new policies. We have no new training as fire. Our primary responsibility is structural firefighting, protecting homes. Fighting fires in the woods is a different beast. That's why it's DNR's primary responsibility. We do get limited training. And one of the things that came out of Tantallon was we needed more training. That hasn't happened. We've got some big frustrations.
Joe, you mentioned PPE, or the personal protective equipment, the coveralls. Are these a specific type of coveralls, these red ones that I see everybody wearing?
Yeah, so they come in different colors depending on the department that you're with. Ours in Halifax historically have been red. There's different ratings on them. So we follow the NFPA standard for wildland protective equipment. Somebody ordered a batch of coveralls after Tantallon that didn't meet that safety requirement, didn't have the NFPA tag in it, and it had to reorder all of that equipment. So a lot of the coveralls that didn't have the NFPA stamp on them were issued to folks once we realized that was happening, and informed management. It took a significant delay in them responding, and we're still waiting for the appropriate equipment to trickle in.
You mentioned a lack of training after Tantallon, Joe. Does training fall on the chief? Is he responsible for training everybody, or does that break down into a department? How does that work?
Ultimately, the fire chief is responsible for all aspects of the fire department. There's a chief of the training division that does, have training officers that report to that individual. That actually position is vacant in Halifax right now, and we're waiting for a posting for the new fire chief to come out of training. But yeah, we've hired a manager of wildfire mitigation. We've seen a pattern with this fire chief where every time there's an issue or a concern, it's addressed by hiring a new manager, and we've seen it over and over. And if the same energy and effort had put into preparing us for wildfires that was put into the accreditation process, we'd be much better off today than we are.
And forgive me if I sound dumb here, but what's the difference between the training that a firefighter receives to fight structural fires and to fight wildfires?
Yeah, the risks are different. The weather has a much bigger impact on wildfires. We train in personal protective equipment, the bunker gear, the traditional firefighting suits, heavy boots, breathing apparatus that we breathe fresh air off our backs. And in wildfires, you're wearing coveralls, gloves, ideally wildland boots that we don't have. You don't have respiratory protection, and you're dealing with the elements of the weather and the topography of the area that you're responding to. Usually water supply is an issue depending on where you are. So you're often carrying pumps into places that have, lakes and ponds. The Susie Lake, we were very fortunate. It was an area under construction with fire hydrants nearby. It was almost best case scenario for us. And those water bombers at the end of the day are the ultimate game changer for a wildfire. Yeah,
I was there, and it was a huge impact when those bombers came on. That leads me to my next question. The province seems, I don't know if reluctant is the word, but they aren't in a big hurry to try and get some of those wildfire water bombers on station here in Nova Scotia. I would imagine that your members are looking to the government to bring some of those here.
It's certainly a morale boost and an energy boost when you see a helicopter or an airplane overhead dropping water on a fire. It is a massive game changer for the people on the ground. And often it's the safest way to extinguish these fires. You still need people to go in and mop up after the water bombers are finished. But yeah, ideally we would have a federal perspective on this. I make the comparison to search and rescue, right? We don't have search and rescue bases in every province across the country, but they're strategically located. They're federally operated and funded. there's an opportunity there where you could have a similar program through the Canadian Forces with air assets for water bombing.
I was at that fire in just jeans and a T-shirt, and I was sweating to death. I can't imagine what your guys in front of that flame were feeling, particularly if they were in their bunker gear. That must have been just exhausting.
Yeah, initially that was the mandate that came out from the department, was either you don't go in or you wear your bunker gear. We identified that as a major health and safety risk. So our members either didn't go in or went in coveralls, but it's still incredibly hot. You're losing a lot of water in sweat. It's difficult to rehydrate when you're half a kilometer away from the hydration station outside in the safe zone. So you've got to keep an eye on your crews. You've got to be rotating people to get them rehydrated and rested, or you're going to end up with medical issues or injuries.
Joe, you mentioned there was an after-action report done on the Tantalum wildfire. Will there be one on Susie's Lake, and do you hope that this one will result in change?
We would love to see an after-action report. I think we're at the place now as a union where the only significant change that we think is going to bring about positive change to frontline firefighters is a change at the fire chief level.
Joe, appreciate your time. I know you're very busy, and we appreciate all the work that you and your members do every day.
Thanks, Dan. I really appreciate your time.
That is Joe Triff from the Atlantic Firefighters Association. I can't even imagine what it would be like to jump off of a truck and not have the required or the proper gear in order to go out and fight a wildfire. I can tell you, I was at the Susie's Lake fire. I wasn't on it. I was very close to it, and it was a scary situation. And just think for a minute, if that wind had been blowing the other way, that fire would have came right into Bears Lake or right across the highway into Clayton Park, and wouldn't have taken very long. We've seen how quick these things can blow up. Look at how quick Long Lake exploded. It was a tense few moments, I can tell you, and that was standing a couple 2-3 kilometers away from it. I can't imagine what that is like on the ground. We're going to dig into this story a little bit more. We're going to reach out to Halifax Fire for comment on this, so make sure you stay tuned right here to the program as we move forward, and we will do our very best to bring you Halifax Fire's thoughts on that in the coming days and maybe weeks. Time for the open hour. We're going to throw open the telephone lines, 902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. There is a increase coming to your power bill, 4.2% next year, 4.2% the year after. Your thoughts on a rather significant increase coming to your electricity bill, and are you getting good service for your money? 902-405-6000. 902-405-6000. The open hour after the news.
Facts. This podcast is supported by Talkspace.
When my husband came home from his military deployment, readjusting was hard for all of us. Thankfully, I found Talkspace.
Talkspace provides professional support from licensed therapists and psychiatric providers online. Military members, veterans, and their dependents ages 13 and older can get fast access to providers, all from the privacy of their computers or smartphones.
I just answered a few questions online, and Talkspace matched me with a therapist. We meet when it's convenient for me, and I can message her anytime. It was so easy to set up, and they accept TRICARE. Therapy was going so well, my husband and I started seeing a couples therapist through Talkspace, too.
Talkspace works with most major insurers, including TRICARE. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com/military. Go to Talkspace.com/military to get started today. That's Talkspace.com/military.
Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show, the Tuesday edition. Hope you're having a fantastic day as we get back to the grind after a long weekend and after a summer. I hope you had some time to spend some time with friends and family, and I know that it's not over yet. I know it sounds like we're saying, it's it, summer's over, roll up the carpets. But it is September now, and we know that it's going to be a lovely fall because we always have lovely falls here in Nova Scotia. September and October are my favorite 2 months of the year, but a lot of things change when we hit September. The provincial government is coming back to work. We understand that the session of the legislature will resume at the end of the month. Vanessa is working very hard behind the scenes, like she does every single day, but she's working very hard behind the scenes to try and secure us some time with Premier Tim Houston as part of our September shows, so that he can come into the studio and hopefully, as he has done in the past, spend some time answering your questions. So we will keep you up to date on what's going on with that. We know that the Dow strike is on people's minds as the school year starts there. We know the school lunch program is being expanded into junior high this year. We had a conversation with the education minister about school lunches and some changes that are coming. I know some of the kids last year didn't like it. I know some of the kids wouldn't eat it. I know some of the parents were concerned about it. The minister said they've changed some of the vendors. They've had some focus groups led by children, which is probably the way it should have been to begin with. And now the menu's changing. So hopefully your kids will eat it. I know that's not always easy, but hopefully they'll eat it, and hopefully you can take advantage of it if you should choose to. That happens as the school year rolls around. We know there's always some concern and consternation as the school year begins. All of that was in the back of the mind, but this morning I woke up and it was like, oh, here we go again. And what I'm referring to is a notice from the utility, that is Nova Scotia Power, and it reads this. Nearly 6 months of discussions, Nova Scotia Power and customer representatives have reached a proposed settlement on power rates for the next 2 years. That's 2026 and 2027. If approved by the Nova Scotia Energy Board, and I hope they're listening really closely today, overall average rates will increase across all customer classes by 2.1% in 26, 2.1 in 27. Now that's everybody. That's industrial, that's commercial, that's all of the customer classes in residential in Nova Scotia Power's Rolodex. Well, what does that mean to you and I? Well, what it means to you and I is that residential rates are expected to increase by 4.1% in both 2026 and 2027. In both 2026 and 2027. That means over the next 2 years, an 8.2% increase in your power bill. How does that make you feel? And are we getting good value for our money? 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. The telephone lines are open. Or, if you like, 1-877-801-8255. What do you think of an 8.2% increase in your power bill over the next couple of years? And are we getting good value for our money? The utility, we requested, of course, the utility to come onto the program to explain this. They said that they weren't doing interviews today, so we will try and find a slot for them as well. The statement, the statement line is this: the settlement is the result of strong collaboration and engagement with customer representatives who work on behalf of customers across Nova Scotia. We appreciate the time and effort that has gone into discussions over the last several months to strike a critical balance of affordability for our customers while continuing to invest in the grid to ensure customers have the service that they can count on. They're saying that they're striking a balance of affordability for our customers, which is you and I, and continuing to invest in the grid, which we know has had problems over the years. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. It is time for the open hour. You can talk about Nova Scotia Power, a proposed rate increase of 8.2%, or whatever it is you want to talk about. That's the beauty of Open Line Radio. Again, I'll tell you the numbers. 902-405-6000. That's 1-877-801-8255. We begin with Dave. Dave, how are you?
Great. How you doing this morning?
Good. What's on your mind today?
I just want to talk about the wood closure there. I know that in the past they've had it, and I'm not totally against it for a short period of time because it brings attention to the fact that people shouldn't be burning and should be paying attention to the fire bans.
Right.
But what I want to bring up was the fire towers and lack of. About 12 years ago, all of the towers were tore down in Nova Scotia, to my knowledge. And just kind of wondering if there's any information on what time a day these fires were reported, what time they think that they were first ignited.
Right.
And if there was fire tower operators, would it make a difference in the fire being reported first light compared to 1 o'clock in the afternoon?
Right.
Now, I know the fire towers have been replaced by an airplane that flies out of Debert and I was told, around 1 o'clock in the afternoon to look for smoke. That's what they use now, to look across the horizon to find the smoke.
Right.
Now, I know a lot of this stuff because I was a fire tower operator. I was one of the last fire tower operators in Dunn Lake, which that tower overlooked Long Lake. So when I used to work there, I would go up, I would stay in a camp at that time, it was about 30 minutes to the closest telephone. There was no cell service. Mm-hmm. And I would stay in the camp for a week, 5 days. And would go in the tower climb the tower at 8 o'clock and stay there till, I believe it was 5. So there would be human eyes on the horizon for that amount of hours. And that being said, would it make the difference having people in towers? Would our forest be open in the summer more than having a complete ban across the province all summer? I mean, like you said earlier in the program about, businesses losing. I know my wife, she's a runner, and they were having what they call capes in Cape Breton.
Yep.
And that was due to I think it was the weekend before the big province-wide shutdown. That was announced on Thursday. So that particular run was canceled, and I believe there was probably maybe 100 runners involved in capes, and that was in Mabou. So a rural community bringing in 100 runners plus their families. That's 200, 300 people coming into a small community. That's wiped out this summer.
Right.
So it's just something to think about.
Dave,
maybe they should look at the times.
When you were in the tower and you were able, if you sighted smoke, how long before you, like, reaction time is kind of what I'm looking at here. How long? Obviously, it'd be different now because we have cell phones, right? So, and hopefully there would be cell service there. How long before somebody spotted some smoke coming from the woods and an aircraft or a DNR firefighter was on scene? Average.
Well, I'm not familiar with the aircraft. There wasn't aircrafts in the air when I was in the fire tower. It was just fire tower operators across the province in different locations.
Right.
And we had radios, so we could radio the whole province.
Right.
So when we reported smoke, we would the depot that I report to directly was Lawrencetown.
Okay.
So I could, from Dunn Lake, which is east of Long Lake, I had coverage right to Lawrencetown. And then facing the other way, I could see the ocean and Kejimkujik.
Holy
so that was my range.
Yeah.
Dunn Lake could see a long ways.
Right.
And I mean, I know that since then, I don't work for the department. I've moved on to different careers. At that time, it was only a seasonal career. You worked in the woods in a fire tower during fire season. Mm. So, I mean, I do know there was other depots in isolated areas. For example, Trafalgar, we call it, pronounce it here on the shore. For years, that used to be that was one of the biggest forest fires prior to the last few years. That was in the 70s, and there's nobody stationed there now. They insurance companies. This is what I was told by DNR, that due to insurance reasons, the firefighters couldn't stay there in that depot. Now that depot is becoming in disarray. Like they don't do no maintenance being done. And I guess the question is, if the insurance companies are pushing firefighters out of the woods or in stations that are remote, what's the cost for insurance companies for the houses and displacement of all the people? And what's the cost in the province?
No, I hear you.
Well, like if they really do the numbers, like I guess, I mean, I could go on for a long time about it. Like I said, so I'll leave it there.
Appreciate it, Dave. Have a great day.
Yeah. Thank you.
902-405-6000, 902-405-6000. The open hour continues after the break. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. This is the open hour. The telephone number is 902-405-6000, 902-405-6000, or if you like, 1-877-801-8255. Nova Scotia Power announcing today a 4.1% increase in residential rates in 2026 and a 4.1% increase in residential rates in 2027. 8.2% increase on your power bill beginning next year for the next couple of years. And my question to you today is, are we getting good value for your money? 902-405-6000 is the number. Let's go back to the phones. We welcome David to the program. David, how are you?
Hi, Dan. Yeah, doing pretty good. I just want to talk about Nova Scotia Power and the interest rates they charge on their overdue balances.
Okay.
Currently, it's like 19.2%. So, I mean, that's the same kind of interest rates they charge you on a credit card.
Right.
But a credit card is unsecured debt where money owed to Nova Scotia Power, if you don't pay that, well, they cut your electricity off. So in the winter you freeze and don't have any lighting, or just you can't get a new electrical connection if you go ahead and move. So it's sort of, I wonder on what basis do they justify charging such high interest rates?
Well, that's a great question.
I mean, yeah, and just to sort of follow up too, I just wonder why our political leaders are such cowards when it comes to Nova Scotia Power. What power does the company hold over them? Because, I mean, say take the latest data breach. If you're Tim Houston, and even if you're not going to do anything about it, why not just showboat and, wag your finger at Nova Scotia Power and say how bad they are and stuff like that? Because it's not like they're going to walk away from their $1 billion investment and lose the, just quit the province kind of thing. And if they do, well, great, we can just take it over. So no harm to us. So, I just don't see the downside of that. But, yeah, going to that data breach, CBC Radio has a show called The Cost of Living on Sundays. It's sort of like economics and that kind of stuff, and it's really good. And they talked about social insurance numbers and just how, important it is to keep them safe because it's a completely unique identifier that follows you around for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. So if somebody has access to that, they can basically do anything. And, I mean, what did we get in exchange for our data, all this stuff being exposed online? Well, we got 5 years of free credit monitoring for basically half the amount of credit monitoring we actually need. And it's just sort of funny that, a little while ago, and I wanted to call up, I was just busy, but I got a letter from Nova Scotia Power saying okay, we want some money. Can you sign up for our online account thing again and stuff like that? But they didn't sort of offer any assurances that, hey, we solved all the problems. It's going to be safe if you do it. And, the same thing won't happen again. But there is no information as to what happened and what the thing was. But at least as far as I know, because when I called up when this all was going on and talked to the person at the call center, the social insurance number is data that they used to collect a long time ago, and they actually went ahead and deleted that, but they didn't delete the backups or at least the deletion cache on their servers. So when all that information got stolen, it wasn't the actual social insurance numbers on their servers. It was the old sort of garbage data that they just didn't bother or think about deleting and stuff like that. So it's just sort of, I don't really think we're getting a lot and we're paying a lot. So it's, I definitely hope, it's an issue the province takes seriously going forward.
David, appreciate the call, sir.
Thank you, Dan.
902-405-6000, 902-405-6000. Lost on package in David's comments there. But one of the things that I'll be watching for is the Premier during the election campaign said that he was going to cap electricity rate hikes as he toured the province and asked for your vote at what at that time was called the national average, right? So not really sure how you come about that number, but it would be interesting. It would be nice to hear from the government about this if they are in agreement with Nova Scotia Power, if this works. then let's just say it. This follows the rules that we've laid out, and it's 8.2% is tough to take for some people. Also, would like to see the Energy Board, the Nova Scotia Energy Board, which used to be the UARB, which I've always said is an unelected board that holds a whole lot of power in this province. Take a really close look at this. I know that they had discussions with a number of groups, including the Consumer Advocate, which is the person that's supposed to advocate for you and I. Also, the Small Business Advocate was there, Industrial Group, the Berwick Electric Commission, Riverport Electric Commission, Light Commission, the town of Mahone Bay, and the town of Antigonish and Port Hawkesbury Paper. But those were the people that they talked to, but they say there's consensus. I don't know many people that are paying their electricity bill here today that would suggest that we should be paying 8.2%, which is well above the rate of inflation. I hope the Energy Board, the NSEB it's called now, has a real close look at this and doesn't just rubber stamp this as we have seen in the past with rate increases. 902-405-6000. Let's welcome Barry to the program. Barry, how are you?
Not too bad. How are you?
Good. What's on your mind?
Regarding Nova Scotia Power, I think there might be a way of creating competition for them, but I'm not 100% sure.
Sure.
And I'll just outline it real quick. The province would take over the distribution somehow or another, take it away from Nova Scotia Power, let them generate the power. And if the province owned the distribution, we would charge Nova Scotia Power for using that distribution system. We'd hire contractors to maintain it and enforce a final financial penalty for every hour of the power outage due to failure of the power line, to give them an incentive to make sure they keep all the trees trimmed and so on. And then you could invite more generators to come in and compete with Nova Scotia Power, charge them for using the distribution system, and eventually you should get a return on your money for the distribution system, and that would finally give Nova Scotia Power competition.
Barry, the only concern that I have at first brush on this is that any increase in expense to Nova Scotia Power, if we find them or if we charge them per kilowatt hour, whatever it is on the distribution system, they're just going to pass that back on to you and I.
Well, it would be a failure if there was a power outage.
Right.
9 times out of 10, it's due to the power line.
Right.
So whatever company came in and signed a contract to maintain that power line,
mm-hmm.
like I say, every hour that it fails, you would charge them a financial penalty. So I don't think Nova Scotia Power would be involved at all in the distribution.
All right, Barry, appreciate it, sir.
Okay, thanks.
902-405-6000, 902-405-6000. Residential rates expected to increase by 4.1% in both 2026 and 2027. That's 8.2% for you and I. My question to you today is this. What do you think of that rate increase? And are we getting good value for our money? 902-405-6000 is the number, or 1-877-801-8255. The utility says the settlement is a result of strong collaboration and engagement with customer representatives who work on behalf of customers. As much as the Consumer Advocate has a job to do, I get it, but I wonder what your thoughts are if we've come to this consensus of an 8.2% increase. I'm pretty sure that many of you would suggest it wouldn't be what you have told them that they should do with the power rates. Politely. Again, their telephone number is 902-405-6000. It's 1-877-801-8255. The open hour continues after the news.
This podcast is supported by Talkspace.
When my husband came home from his military deployment, readjusting was hard for all of us. Thankfully, I found Talkspace.
Talkspace provides professional support from licensed therapists and psychiatric providers online. Military members, veterans, and their dependents ages 13 and older can get fast access to providers, all from the privacy of their computers or smartphones.
I just answered a few questions online, and Talkspace matched me with a therapist. We meet when it's convenient for me, and I can message her anytime. It was so easy to set up, and they accept TRICARE. Therapy was going so well, my husband and I started seeing a couples therapist through Talkspace too.
Talkspace works with most major insurers, including TRICARE. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com/military. Go to Talkspace.com/military to get started today. That's Talkspace.com/military.
All right, welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. It is the Tuesday edition. It is the open hour. The lines are open. 902-405-6000. 902-405-6000. 4.1% increase year one, 4.1% increase in year two. And I will say with a caveat attached to that the release says approximately. So maybe it's a little more, maybe it's a little less. But anyway, the number they gave us was 4.1% each year. So that, in my world, in Dan math, is 8.2% over 2 years. My question to you is, A, one, what do you think of the increase? Two, do you think we're getting good value for our dollars? 902-405-6000. Let's welcome Topher to the program. Topher, how are you?
Good morning, Dan, the man Alstrand. I'm almost as good as you.
Well, it's nice being on the top. It really is.
Well, NSP, well, for 8%, Dan.
Yep,
well,
8.2 actually, Topher, 8.2%.
8.2. I've got good news for Dave. He was crying about the 19% interest they charge on overdue bills.
Right.
Well, they say right here, I've got my bill right here, Dan.
Okay.
Your bill was estimated for this period, so that's a guesstimate.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I haven't paid. So I haven't paid and they haven't charged me anything because they guesstimated the bill.
Okay.
So because you know why? Because they can't read those smart meters.
Because of the hack, right? Yep.
Because of the security breach, yeah. Well, Dan, I have a suggestion for Nova Scotia Power. I'm going to charge them $300 so I can read my meter.
Right.
And that would make us even.
Access fee.
Yeah, an access fee. So until they get this security breach fixed, I think they're very incompetent in installing all these smart meters. How smart are they now when they can't seem to have anyone to go out and read them?
Used to work pretty good when we had meter readers, right?
It sure worked real well, Dan. Yeah, and it kept Nova Scotians employed.
Right.
4% on wages. I haven't seen that. Are you getting 4% wage next year on your
I hope
wage,
so.
Dan?
I highly doubt it, but I hope so.
Yeah, 20 cents a kilowatt hour. Yeah, thanks a lot. We're getting real good with this. They're really good at asking for money from us, Dan.
Yep.
But this security breaches and the smart meter installs, it just reeks of incompetence. We need somebody else in there. So anyway, Nova Scotia Power, I'm charging you $300 to read the meter. We're even.
Topher, appreciate the call, sir.
Thanks, Dan.
Have a good one. 902-405-6000, 902-405-6000. Ken sent me an email and haven't really had a chance to dig into this, but it says this, that back on August 28th, which wasn't that long ago, Credit Bureau TransUnion, which is the company I do believe that we're using to monitor our breach, said that more than 4 million people's data was exposed in a recent hack involving an identified third party. So I don't know if it's the same branch of the company that Nova Scotia Power is using. I don't know if it's the same, corporation. It sounds like it is, but I don't know if it is. But it looks like TransUnion was also subject to a security breach when it came to their information. So there's always that, right? 902-405-6000. Where are we going here? Let's go to Barry. Barry, how are you?
Not too bad. This just lets you know what's coming. We're always going to get increases. But I was out about 3 weeks ago, went by this house. They have all that on the roof, the new solar power.
Yep.
They have two electric cars that they are plugging in. This is not coming from the power corporation. The only way to cure this problem is eventually these things on the roof are going to be even better than they are. Is eventually there's not going to be a power corporation as we know it.
Yeah, we're going to generate our own, right?
And I've seen now that you also on your car, you go to work. You're only a couple of miles from home. You can go to work in the parking lot. It's going to have a thing on it. It's going to take solar power. You can go home and you can pump that into the car, into your house. And because you have your storage batteries.
Yeah, like the F-150. In fact, they sold the F-150 with one of the features that it could power your house in an electrical failure.
Hey, but they have electrical plug-ins. So we're heading that way. It's like battery cars. People talk about them catching fire. Well, you know what? I had a 73 Astra, I guess it was, and at 39,000 miles, it was gone, motor gone.
Right.
I got rid of an accident that was 400,000 clicks. The combustion engines, improve that much. So electric cars are going to do the same thing. We're going to be able to change our way of living in a more economical way, and that's the way you got to go. We're not going to change the power corporation. And by the way, New Brunswick's having all kinds of trouble with their power corporation being too expensive. And they're run by the government. So you're going to have to live with it. And just, if you get the money, if you're young enough, I mean, I'm pushing 80, so it ain't worth it. But if you're young enough and you own your own home, put panels in, buy electric cars, and you're going to save a whole lot of money in power.
Barry, appreciate the call, sir. Have a fantastic day. 902-405-6000. 902-405-6000. The solar panel issue is certainly intriguing. There is a rather large startup cost attached to it. Well, rather large, I think, is all relevant, right? But I have seen in my neighborhood a lot of people are starting to put panels onto their homes, going along the same lines of what Barry said. Another thing that I want you to think about is the Premier has been very public about his be-all to end-all to save the economy of Nova Scotia, being this wind west project is his 4 areas offshore in Nova Scotia with the windmills and generating much more electricity than's needed by Nova Scotians. I think the Premier said, and I stand to be corrected, I think the Premier said 2.6 gigawatts at max capacity Nova Scotia consumes, and this thing will consume much more than that, or generate much more than that. 48 or 50 or 60, whatever number many gigawatts it was, and he was going to sell, or is going to sell the rest of it to the rest of Canada and maybe even to the United States. All of that being said, I wonder if this is a way that we can break the monopoly of Nova Scotia Power. If the provincial government controls the generation of electricity, then should they not be able to set the cost? And then Nova Scotia Power or Emera, whatever, is the distribution company? Do you think that this is part of the Premier's long-term vision? I don't know. I'm curious to your thoughts. 902-405-6000. Let's grab another call before the break. Chris, how are you?
Good morning. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Not bad at all, thank you. You asked if we're getting good value from Nova Scotia Power.
Right.
That's an impossible question to answer.
Why is that?
Well, I think so, and the reason is, what's our alternative?
That's just
for comparison?
Right. We don't have any other choice.
We don't have an alternative. It's like you can compare, for example, Bell to Eastlink or Bell to TELUS or whatever,
right,
and make your own comparison because they're alternatives to each other. But with Nova Scotia Power, we don't have any. So we really can't say. We don't know if we're getting good service or good value or not. We may be getting the greatest value you could ever get out of a utility. We just don't know that because we've never had a comparison.
Yeah, I sometimes doubt that, though, because our power rates are so high. We have if not one of the highest power rates in the country.
Yeah, well, Nova Scotia and PEI are pretty well tied for the highest rates of all the provinces in the country. Northwest Territories is a lot higher because the
geography
and that sort of thing. The geography. National average, someone was mentioning that or whatever earlier, and the national average is 15.5 cents per kilowatt hour. We're paying 18.5. Interesting enough, the Berwick Electric Commission down in the little town of Berwick down the valley that we've all probably heard of and many of us have been to, they're paying around 14 cents a kilowatt hour.
Right.
And they buy a lot of their electricity from Nova Scotia Power and redistribute it to the Berwick and surrounding area. How the hell can they do it for 14? That's 25% cheaper than we're paying Nova Scotia Power on a residential rate.
Fantastic question.
How do they do that? Maybe the Premier should go, or the Premier should look at Berwick Electric Commission and see what they're doing and look at it for a province-wide thing. You had a caller earlier mentioning that maybe the government should take over the grid. Well, I think they've kind of already started that, Dan, because you're probably aware of it, and a lot of people aren't. But the government, provincial government, recently established what they call the Nova Scotia Independent Energy System Operator.
Yes.
And they are going to take over the management of the grid from Nova Scotia Power. They've appointed a board of directors, I think 10 or 12 different people there. They're supposedly are very, very qualified and experienced in doing this. That remains to be seen. But they're already moving in that direction, I would suggest, by that implementation of that board. Had you heard of that, Dan?
I had, but I was curious to see how it was all going to roll out because, you have if Nova Scotia Power has, do we have to purchase the lines from them, the distribution lines? Are they their property? Is it the property of the province already, and Nova Scotia Power is using them? I don't know the ownership issue.
Well, this is the thing. There's a lot rolled up in that whole ball of wax, but right. We don't know yet. It hasn't come out, and I've done a little research on it. I really can't find the answers right away.
Not easy to find stuff from Nova Scotia Power, isn't it?
It's difficult to find information that people or entities do not want you to find out.
Right.
Anything that they're proud of, it's out there. It's all over the internet. It's
Absolutely.
easy to find. They put up a bloody billboard on the highway. But whether 4.1% is high or not, you'd have to see the internal workings, the books and stuff to know that. But it seems very high, the same as most of the increases we get, and especially coming up with our water increase of almost 37%.
Right.
I mean, I think that's ridiculous. And the reason these costs are more pronounced to the average Nova Scotian like me and you, Dan, we're only average Nova Scotians. We're not wealthy people.
I'm certainly not wealthy.
I know I'm not. We're not getting 4.1%, or nope. We're not getting 37%. Or whatever. We're lucky to get anything. And look at the seniors here in this country. They get like 0.01% or something stupid increase in the OAS.
Right.
So for anyone that's getting by on ordinary incomes and wages, and you see your income going up, if at all, by like a minor amount, all of these increases are more pronounced and a lot harder to swallow, because I don't care what anybody says, if you don't have at least the minimum increase every year of all these utilities, property taxes, and everything coming in, you have to sacrifice somewhere. You're going to give up something. You're going to give up heat to eat. I think Polyev used that one, can eat or heat and whatever. But do you not agree that if you don't have enough coming in, you've got to give it up somewhere?
You're
not keeping up with these things.
It's basic math. If there's X amount coming in and your expenses go up by 4.1 or 8.2 over 2 years, then it has to come from somewhere. And there's no infinite amount of money, at least in my bank account.
All right. What are you planning to give up if you had to?
Well, that's just it, right?
What would you give up, Dan?
That's just it. It certainly would. I would give up discretional spending first, right? And that could impact the groceries. It can impact anything. It's
well, you say discretional. Groceries really are not discretional, though, are they? We have to have them.
Absolutely, we do. But it's the nicety stuff at the end of the grocery bill that would go first.
So
right?
you'll eat hamburg and wieners instead of a T-bone steak occasionally.
Right.
That's exactly. I agree. But we have to give up something. And really, when you come right down to, especially for seniors in this country that have worked to make the country what it is that really fair? Should we have to look at giving up something just to pay a utility bill that wants 4.1% extra, or the Water Commission 37%? What the hell is that for? To pay for the $84 million new building that they want to go into? I mean, this is ridiculous. It's got to stop. And don't forget, 6 months from now, guess what we're going to be talking about?
Taxes.
Tax rates, budget deliberations again. Oh, I can hardly wait for that one.
Betcha. Chris, I appreciate the call, sir.
Dan, thanks very much.
902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. The open hour continues after the break.
X.
All right, welcome back to Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Ahlstrand. The open hour continues. The telephone number is 902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. An email I received during the break said, hey, Dan, I had a chance to visit the valley in which our family has land close to the fire in Long Lake. In talking to several people, especially a firefighter, they've indicated that since they're fighting the fire, they're at risk of losing their personal jobs. The writer adds, what a shame. Also, why haven't the government called in the military to assist in these situations? And goes on to read, come on, Premier Houston, it's a no-brainer, and that's from Paul. I've heard that story from a couple of different people and a couple of different sources that volunteer firefighters in particular are giving up paid shifts or their full-time jobs in order to fight that fire in Long Lake. And I would truly hope, and I hope that the employers are listening to the program right now, that you don't do that. I get it that you're short-staffed, and I get it that it puts you in a bad situation, and I understand that you have a business to run. But that being said, if it would look very bad upon you if you were to lay off a volunteer firefighter who is busy fighting that big fire in Long Lake. Sometimes I think, and I know it's been discussed on this program at length on a number of different occasions, that volunteer firefighters don't get as much recognition as they should. These are people that are giving up their time, and in this case, they're giving up some of their shifts or some of their jobs to help fight these fires. It would be truly a shame should that happen. As for the military, I don't know what the rules are. I know that we've seen the military called in different provinces this year, and I don't know what's the if there's a set of requirements that are needed to call in the military to help with a fire. But we will try to dig those out for you. Speaking of the Woods Band, we welcome Matt to the program. Matt, how are you?
Good morning, Dan. How you doing?
Good. What's on your mind, sir?
Well, I'm driving from Cape Breton to Yarmouth today, and I drove by one of the big black highway signs over the highway near Antigonish, and it says, "Stay out of the woods, $25,000 ban." And that's over.
It is over. Absolutely over there. Yep.
So if anyone's listening from Tim Houston's office, hopefully they can update the signs.
Right.
You know, and the only reason that we in Cape Breton and HRM have survived the Stay Out of the Woods ban is because firefighters and command center came from Ontario and saw for themselves the situation in the state in Nova Scotia and realized that having a fire ban across the province isn't necessary.
Matt, appreciate it. Sure.
By fire ban, I mean stay out of the woods ban. I totally agree with no fires right now, but ridiculous to make people stay out of the woods. And regarding the volunteers, I feel bad for them, especially when firefighters from different stations are being turned away and declined because Tim Houston needs this fire in the valley where they're spraying glyphosate, which is the major cause of
Well, I don't
fires.
know if the Premier needs the fire.
Well, it sure helps his cause.
Matt, appreciate it, sir.
Thank you.
I really and truly would be absolutely shocked if a government was allowing a fire to burn to advance some agenda for spraying trees. I would be absolutely just gobsmacked if that was the case. I truly find that very hard to believe. But everybody's entitled to their opinion on this program, and that's the beauty of Open Line Radio. Daniel, how are you?
Good. How are you, Dan?
Good. What's on your mind?
I just wanted to talk about the increases and kind of loop it into them trying to get rid of the fixed-term leases and putting on the cap over your lease or your rent increase.
Yep.
I just don't get how you're going to put a cap on us, but you're going to allow all these businesses to go away. I mean, I think the cap right now is 5%.
Yep. Rent cap.
I mean,
yep.
The 30% from the water and the almost 5% from the power company. We're looking at more than 5% on that homeowner already, just in those increases.
Daniel,
alone.
are you a landlord?
Right now I'm just house hacking. So
Okay.
I have a house there. I'm only 25 years old, so I have a place,
Fair
and then I have a couple of my buddies. I have a basement apartment that I have a couple living in with their kids, and then my buddy just lives with me in my part of the apartment.
Nice.
But that's something I'm interested in. Definitely is doing the rental income properties like that, but it just doesn't make sense to me. And the fixed term leases are just, it's kind of a safety that nobody's talking about for the landlord. I mean, you hear all of the horror stories about people that have these horrible renters that they can't get out of their house. I mean, I've heard stories people aren't paying for months on months on months on end, and they can't get them out because our legal system is so backed up and broken in this scenario.
I hear the stories too, Daniel, but I also will put a caveat on that, saying that I don't think that the majority of renters in Nova Scotia are bad renters.
Yes and no, but I don't think majority of landlords are bad landlords as well. I mean,
Agreed.
you're always going to have your bad apples on both sides of things. But I'm not against having caps either. I just don't like how are you going to cap me, but you're not going to cap all the businesses that I have to pay the bills to?
Right, because it comes from the same pocket. All of that stuff comes out of your wallet, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Daniel, appreciate
Thank you for letting me drop my point, and have a great day.
Have a fantastic day. 902-405-6000 is the number. Put that one down on a piece of paper by the phone or put it into your phone. We're going to open up the telephone lines again tomorrow and continue the conversation. It's fantastic to hear from you all each and every day. I learn so much from each and every one of you. We're going to stop, take a break. We're going to get an update on the news. And on the other side of it, we're going to welcome our good friend and astrophysicist. How many times can you say that? I have a friend that's an astrophysicist. Well, we do. And his name is Dr. Rob Thacker, and he will be joining us for Science Files after the break. You have a science-related question? Here's an opportunity to get it answered. 902-405-6000. The man with his eyes in space. Dr. Rob Thacker is next. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. We're back after the news.
X.
Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. It is Tuesday. It is just after noontime, and that means it's time to welcome our good friend and astrophysicist, Dr. Rob Thacker, into the studio today. Dr. Rob, how are you, sir?
I'm good. Thanks very much for the intro. I can be your friend and an astrophysicist.
Well, that's just it. How many people can say that? I have a friend that's an astrophysicist. Well, we do. Yeah. You just returned from a wonderful excursion to the wilds of Scotland.
I did. I had a really wonderful time. In fact, it's really a little bit embarrassing, because if someone had told me how beautiful the mountains in the Highlands and some of the coastal inlets and so on were, I would have gone there when I was much, much younger. But this time, my wife is a Campbell, so she very, very far back hails from an area not far from where we were. And so we went and had an amazing time. I mean, I got stunning sunrises. We were getting up to see the sunrise quite a lot as well. And so it was just epic landscape, really incredible. And not that many people up there, too. So it was kind of great from that perspective. In fact, probably more deer than people.
There you go. There's something you don't get to. Now, are your legs on fire from all the walking?
We didn't actually do crazy amounts of walking, if I'm totally honest, because we were there primarily for photography. We're both sort of pretty semi-serious photographers, and so we were doing a lot of that stuff. And so when you get up at like 3 o'clock in the morning to catch the sunrise,
you're crazy,
and then you go back to bed about 9 o'clock, you work till about 12, you do a little bit of work on the photos, and then you go back out again in the evening to do the sunset.
And golden hour, of course.
And you get two. And I will say that the sunsets probably were better than, the sunrises were better than the sunsets in general.
And you had wonderful weather, too, which didn't hurt.
This is the funniest thing, because as people there were saying, well, you're going to be thinking Scotland's like this all the time. It's not. It rains. It blows a gale. Yeah. And so we did come away with probably a very, very inappropriate assessment of what the Highlands are like in August.
902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. This is Science Files. If you have a science-related question, this is your opportunity. Dr. Thacker's here for the next 60 minutes. He'll do his very best to answer that. And if you like, 1-877-801-8255 is the toll-free number to get onto the program. Dr. Rob, I saw a headline when I was prepping today to come in to the show. And I know we've talked about Northern Lights in the past.
Yep.
But it looks like I don't even know if Nova Scotia is included in this, but a good chunk of the country is going to be treated to the lovely green lights.
Yeah, it looks like there's what we'd call a sort of like moderate to strong forecast, although I've just looked up the Aurora forecast in general, and it's not that amazing. I mean, that's one of the things I do feel I need to point out, that we're so far south here that for us to see something, and don't get me wrong, what we saw last October was absolutely spectacular. That was truly an incredible Aurora event, but something like that is pretty rare, like seriously rare, once every 10 years if you're lucky, kind of rare. And so we're looking at a forecast right now, which is in the sort of like mid-range. I'll be really surprised if we get to see anything here, to be completely honest. A lot of the time when we see things that have a sort of like pretty strong forecast, it was a big NX flare or something like that, what you see from here is just kind of like a little glow on the horizon. And if you've got a camera, you can just about see it, but your eyesight is often just not really easy to see. So, if you're an Aurora chaser, sure, maybe you want to get out there and have a look for it, but not something that I'm going to be looking out for myself.
What is an Aurora Borealis?
Oh, well, that's the fun question.
See,
and so,
can you tell that he's an astrophysicist?
I'm going to geek out. But what we need to remember about the sun is it's a very, very magnetic system. And so what happens is, there are all of these magnetic fields on the sun that every now and again there is an event that happens in which we call magnetic reconnection, which is a fancy name for basically all of the energy involved in the lines of the magnetic field suddenly reconnecting and releasing energy. And when that happens, we get these big solar flares which send out particles, often nuclei of hydrogen atoms, out into a giant wind that will just blast across space at fractions of the speed of light, to be honest. It goes very quickly. It's launched very quickly. And so it gets to us in like maybe 2-3 days, something like that. And when it comes to the Earth, it's going to interact with the Earth's magnetic fields. And so we all know that the Earth has a magnetic field. That's how we find the North Pole, things like that. And so when all of that material arrives, it's charged, so it will feel a magnetic current, and then it will do all sorts of interactions in the upper atmosphere with the atoms that are up there as well in the upper atmosphere. So you get interactions with things like nitrogen, oxygen, and so on. And so then you'll have all of those atoms suddenly being energized up or down. And once they get energized up and come back down again, you will see emissions of different colors in that process.
Mostly green.
Mostly green. That's why the one that we had in last October was really unusual, because that was strongly red, right? And that's associated with a very specific transition in oxygen that can only happen when the activity is happening really quite high up, about 500 kilometers. Most of the time, the activity is around about 300 kilometers.
Why is it that the Northern Lights or the Aurora Borealis
yep,
are primarily seen in northern Canada, well, in the northern hemisphere, as opposed to across all of Canada? Why do they is it because of the orientation of the Earth, and that's where these solar flares hit?
It's mainly the fact that if you were to look at the poles, you'll see a concentration of field lines up around the poles. And where you have the concentration of field lines, essentially that's where the material is getting funneled to because of that geometry. And so you have one down at the South Pole as well, the Aurora Australis. And so then when you have that sort of like material coming in from the suns, see, this is the funny thing. I'm literally sitting here and doing stuff with my hands.
We need a camera.
Which doesn't work on the radio. So this is really funny. I've just caught myself doing that. What are you doing, Rob? Anyway, so you have this wind coming from the sun and it gets funneled to the North and the South Poles. And so that's why it's got a sort of like latitude preference for being very high in latitudes, just because of the geometry of the magnetic field around the Earth.
And you mentioned the colors, and that green's predominant, but we've seen red, we've seen other colors. Yeah. Is that a spectrum issue, or
it's just related to the particular elements? So I think oxygen was a transition of oxygen in for red. I think there's is it nitrogen or oxygen? I can't remember the one that's predominantly green. I'd have to look that up. But it depends upon the elements, because what you got to remember is every atom has different energy levels associated with the electrons that zoom around the nucleus. And so the difference in those energies determines basically the color of the emission that you see from the atom. And so it's very particular to a given atom.
Is there a better time of year when these things happen? Like the one we saw was in October, was in the fall.
Yeah.
And I've heard stories that like in the north in the wintertime, it's really prevalent in places like the Arctic or in Lapland or those areas.
Yeah, you've got it. You kind of answered the question. So the real issue is hours of darkness, right? And so the quality of seeing that you get is a bit better in the winter because it's colder and so there's less water in the air, but that's not a particularly big thing for seeing aurora. It's something that astronomers worry about quite a lot for seeing stars and planets and things like that. But for aurora, in general, you just really need to have the number of hours of darkness and you need to have the basically geomagnetic storms coming in as well. And so there's no strong correlation between geomagnetic storms and the seasons on Earth, but at the end of the day, the more hours of darkness you have, the more likely you are to see something.
Right,
exactly.
that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
The darker it is, the better chance you have to see
it.
Is there any danger associated with these solar flares? I hear these stories all the time that we're going to get this big one that's going to melt the electrical grid.
I mean, we have events in the last 40 years where we've had electrical grid problems in Canada, right? So that's not a surprise. And we've had satellites go down as well, the Anik Panic. And so, if we got a really, really big event, we could see some damage to power lines, but all of that said, this is something that people try to engineer for. There are disconnect systems. There are systems that you can dump a lot of energy into as well. So there is a fair amount of thought that goes into trying to protect. But at the end of the day, whenever you have a really, really long piece of metal, the nature of magnetic fields is they are going to create currents in that. And when you have very, very big magnetic fields, you can tend to get very, very big currents. So we go back to the 1869 Carrington event. All the telegraphs operators were reporting like sparks jumping from the ends of the telegraph because here was this great big long line in the ground of metal that was being energized. And so, in fact, the batteries that were normally used, they didn't need them for a while. There was so much persistent energy in the actual system.
Can we predict, or are we able to predict solar flares or the intensity of them?
Not to any. It's actually quite tricky. So the geometry of the field really matters, right? And so we don't have a good handle on that. We can tell from sunspot activity when there's likely to be something. There's a general correlation there. And because we have satellites that are around the sun as well, monitoring it a lot of the time as well. So we can see as soon as there's a big flare. That we know. Then knowing what the precise impact of that flare is going to be on the Earth's geomagnetic system, that's tricky to predict, right? And so we'll still sort of like try and do space weather forecasts. That's something that people have been doing for a long time. But it's actually really hard because magnetic systems are they have more, I was about to use a technical term, what's the way? They have more things going on in them than we can measure off once they come out of the sun. And because of that, we can't know everything we really need to know to make a really accurate prediction. And so by the time they get to the Earth, most of the time you'll see forecasts say, we think there's going to be a lot of activity, but there may not be, right? And so I certainly know I've got up to see things and been disappointed, right? That happens. I've also not got up to seeing things, and things were really quite exciting. So it does go both ways. And so if you're an aurora chaser, you'll understand the sort of like irony of that statement.
The telephone number is 902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. If you have a question, a science-related question for Dr. Thacker, here's your opportunity. Again, 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Science Files continues after the break. He's Dr. Rob Thacker. I'm Dan Alstrand. This is Science Files on 95.7 News Radio. The telephone number is 902-405-6000, 902-405-6000. If you have a question for Dr. Thacker, he will do his very best to answer it. We got an email during the break, Dr. Rob. It says, what would happen to Earth's climate if the moon was suddenly thrown out of Earth's orbit? So if the moon got out of whack and left.
Yeah, so let's remember, because the important thing here is what actually sets the climate, right? And so, climate. Let me be more specific. What sets the seasons? I think that's the better way to look at it. So the seasons are essentially set by the tilt of the Earth, right? So this 28-degree tilt that we have with our spin axis allows us to go through different lengths of days, right? And then we have, during the summer, for example, when we're getting more sunlight, we're getting more heat onto the Earth where we are, and so on. And so that's helping us to have sort of like warmer days and so on. So the question is, what would happen to the Earth if the moon suddenly disappeared and went off? So if the Earth's axis was stable, then the moon disappearing wouldn't have that significant an impact, right? So it would literally just change the kind of tides we see and so on. But here's the thing. The moon is a heavy object orbiting around the Earth, and to a certain extent, it stabilizes our spin axis. And so there's been a number of studies done looking at what happens to the Earth's spin axis if you got rid of the moon. And I don't think anyone knows the answer for sure, but there is a possibility that if you removed the moon suddenly, then the Earth's spin axis would become somewhat unstable. And if it does become unstable, then all of the things we just talked about in terms of like the changes in the seasons and so on, those could suddenly become more variable, right? And so that, I think, is the thing that is the most sort of like concerning when people ask that particular question. What would happen if the moon suddenly disappeared? Now, on top of that, there is probably a whole bunch of animals, as we know, who use the moon for navigation and things like that. And so those animals wouldn't be too happy, right? Because there's nothing else as bright as the moon in the night sky if you're using that for some specific reason. And so there would be a pretty significant difference to the ecosystem if the moon suddenly disappeared before we even talk about the climate.
How does the moon impact the tides? You often hear that the moon cycle impacts the height of tide.
Yeah, so it does. I mean, that is essentially the strongest determining factor we have in the tides. The sun has an impact as well. And so this is all related to basically the force across the Earth, for a better way of putting it, rather than just the force associated with the moon and so on. And so that sort of like pull towards the moon is essentially creating what we call the tidal bulge. And then the Earth is literally spinning through that, right? And so then on top of that, you have the sun's impact as well. And so you'll also have this thing of having two tides a day and so on. But at the end of the day, the best way to think about it is you've got this impact of having different gravitational strengths associated with the moon's pull at different points. And that's what gives rise to the tides.
So the different, I would imagine that the orbit of the moon is responsible for that. And because you see bigger tides at full moon as opposed to
you got it right. So at full moon, you've got both the moon and the sun are working together, right? And that's the main thing. And it doesn't matter which side they're on, right? So you have new moons, big tides then, full moons, big tides then, and so on. So you're going to have this situation of when things are very much aligned, your tidal forces are going to be maximized.
902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. Saw an article this week on the BBC about Canada's lunar rover, which I know we've talked about in the past. They say that this is going to could reignite Canada's space industry. Tell me a little bit about this rover. It's built in Toronto, I do believe, right?
Yeah, so this is something that I've heard a bit about. I know one of the people who's involved in it, Gordon Osinski at University of Western Ontario. So this is Cadensis Aerospace has been building it, and it's an interesting idea. It's really kind of focused on water, right? And people may be sort of wondering, why is water on the moon interesting? And water on the moon is interesting because people need to be on the moon, right? You need to be able to find sources of water. And so there's been this theory for a long time about where precisely water can be found on the moon. There's been interest in sort of like looking at the poles because there are craters in the south polar region of the moon that literally don't get sunlight. Right. And if that's the case, there's a possibility that you could have ices in them. Right. And so, in fact, there's been an Indian mission not long ago to actually shoot something down and see what came up in terms of the puff and whether we could see water and so on. So the challenge with that is if you go somewhere where there's no sunlight, how are you going to power this thing? Right. And so that is the challenge. So you got to find somewhere that sort of is able to survive in darkness, but is also capable of surviving in the sort of like capable of surviving in the light, which can actually be really hot, right? So because the surface of the moon, if you don't have a way of dissipating the energy, can easily get up to like tens and tens of degrees, even up to 100°C in certain places. So you have to be careful in designing your particular rover to be able to survive these extremes, right? And that's the key thing. So you have to have both protection against cold temperatures, because once you go into darkness, you're going down to, I don't know, like probably minus 150, minus 200 or something like that.
A little chilly.
A little chilly, to put it mildly, colder than Saskatchewan. So, sorry, that's there's a very funny YouTube video about stuff Saskatchewans say about T-shirt on the middle of January, minus 20, summer's coming.
Yeah.
And so anyway, you've got to be able to build the rover to be able to cope with this and so on. And so that's potentially doable. We've been designing spacesuits to survive, for humans to survive in and so on, so we can do that. But then you've got this issue of designing wheels that are effective, and that's pretty difficult because moon dust is nasty stuff, right? The lunar regolith, to give it its proper name, was as soon as astronauts put foot on the moon, they realized this stuff was really, really annoying. It gets in everything. If you have seals, as you have seals on spacesuits, it gets into those. If you have bearings on wheels, it gets into those. And so this is actually a really difficult thing to deal with. And it's one of the key things that we actually have to figure out if we're going to go back to the moon, right, and have extensive sort of like habitable places there, how we actually deal with the regolith.
Is that what all this exploration is as of late? These lunar, this new focus or renewed focus on the moon? Is it for habitation, or is it for purely just because we want to know?
It's very much, I think, this time around. We've been to the moon. We have hundreds of pounds of lunar rocks that were brought back by Apollo. We understand a lot of the geology of the moon pretty well. And so this is really about learning how to go back there and operate there, because it's a harsh environment. Like we just talked about the changes in temperatures. You go from light to dark, right? Again, that requires spacesuits for humans, but even for machinery operating there, right? People have talked about doing 3D printing on the moon using lunar regolith. Now, okay, that's an interesting idea, but how are you going to be able to make that work in a low gravity environment with the regolith, which is pretty horrible to work with? You've got to be able to pipe it without things getting gunged up. So there's a lot that needs to be learned about operating in the lunar environment. And that's really going to be what I think we'll see. Certainly the Americans pushing on a lot more. And I think you'll see a lot more of that done actually by private firms as well, because that's kind of where the potential payoffs are down the road.
How far off are we?
This is the thing, that going to the moon is not difficult, right? I think we need to just say that openly. It's not actually that difficult. We've been doing it for decades. There's the challenge of going back to the moon is people are trying to do it on next to no money, right? And that makes it difficult. And so we have an entirely new set of technologies, new control technologies, the sort of mammoth control engineering we did in the 60s with Apollo. We don't work that way anymore. Literally, engineering has changed. And so all of those engineering for every outcome systems that we used to build, like people having to have sort of like, this is what you do if you get this error code and so on, we don't work like that anymore, right? So there's a lot more that has to be, in some sense, relearned to go back to the moon. And we're seeing that because everyone's saying, well, why are these private missions to the moon not able to land, or they're landing and then falling over? And I'm literally saying it's because it's a low gravity environment. People have new systems and they're just doing the engineering all over again.
He's Dr. Rob Thacker. This is the Science Files. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. We're going to get an update on the news, and the Science Files will continue on the other side. If you have a question, 902-405-6000 is the number. We're back with Dr. Rob after the break. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. This is Science Files. He is Dr. Rob Thacker. He's here to answer your science-related questions. The telephone number is 902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. Dr. Rob, an email question. It says, could Dr. Thacker elaborate on the importance of interstellar objects? There is 3I Atlas, supposed to make a close call in November. It's the third known interstellar object coming into our solar system. And then adds, what are the controversies surrounding Oumuamua and Aviloa?
Okay, so Oumuamua.
Oumuamua. I knew I was going to get that wrong.
And so Aviloa. So let me try and start this off on the right foot. So Avi Loeb is a very, very smart person. Avi Loeb has written dozens of papers in my own field in cosmology and is widely acknowledged as being a very brilliant scientist. And so the thing with Avi is, though, he's prepared to put his neck out and say things that really a lot of people won't. And so in this particular case, he wrote a paper analyzing the trajectory of Oumuamua as it came through the solar system. There was a few issues with the precise acceleration. Some of these things are actually quite difficult to measure well, so that's important to point out as too. And basically, his thesis is, well, these things we're pretty sure are coming from other planetary systems because they're coming in too fast to have come from our own. And that's undeniable. Everyone agrees on that. And so obviously, well, maybe these things are manufactured by alien civilizations and so on. And so that is something that is, it's not entirely crazy, but the reality is there's a lot of ways you can think of objects being ejected during the formation of planetary systems, and that is most likely what we think these particular objects are. And so with Oumuamua, it came through, disappeared. There was a slight anomaly in the overall trajectory and velocity, acceleration, I should say. And that was the cause of like a real sort of, could this be something unusual? And I think at the end of the day, people did a number of other calculations, factoring other things like the solar radiation pressure and stuff like that, and the actual tumbling and so on. And if I remember correctly, the answer at the end of the day, or the agreement at the end of the day, was largely no. This wasn't something that was that unusual or difficult to predict. And so with 3i Atlas, this is a much bigger object. This is the biggest object we've seen so far. And so it's unlikely to be impacted by these variable things like solar wind pressure and the actual pressure from the sunlight as well in the same way, and the off-gassing that happens when you get that solar heating and things like that. And so 3i Atlas is big. And so this is something that, I don't know, was probably worth looking at if we could, right? The isotopic ratios of the water on 3i Atlas would be really interesting to know. This would be water from another planetary system. That would be really cool to know. And so this is the one frustrating thing about 3i Atlas, that it's very difficult just to suddenly launch a mission to it. It's moving very fast. It will go through its closest approach in November and December, and that's kind of a lost opportunity in some sense. That this would be like the first real opportunity to get something out there and look at it, but you need to have something that moves very, very quickly, and we don't have anything like that we could just launch. So that's not going to happen. And so Avi's position on 3i Atlas is, look, this is something that we could get up close to if we had the right mission, and I kind of agree that that's a fairly reasonable criticism. That is something that I think we will see more attempts to actually intercept over the next few years. Maybe it might take a decade, maybe two or something like that. But certainly once the Rubin telescope, which is now operating down in Chile, starts bringing in more data and we find more and more of these things, and trust me, there's going to be more and more of these things, then somewhere down the line, I'm really excited at the possibility of us doing some kind of intercept mission to one of these. So I think that part of Avi's write-up on this, I think, makes a lot of sense.
So the idea would be to launch an interceptor to either align with or collide with one of these things so that you could get data from it.
Exactly. And so we've done this with comets. We did this way back in the 80s with comets. And so we're still doing it now with other objects, bringing back samples and things like that. It's going to be very difficult. I don't quite know how we could get a sample back other than picking up something that had come off, right? That would be interesting in and of itself. But getting a sample back is really difficult because it's going to be really hard to land, right? Because this thing is going so fast, you've got to be able to match its speed, and that's going to be really difficult. It's really whooshing through the solar system at sort of 3 or 4 times the typical speed of an asteroid that's going through this around the solar system, around the sun. So I'm hopeful, but this is one thing we're going to miss our opportunity this time because we don't have the technology. That's all there is to it right now.
Is there any danger of these things actually hitting us?
Really, really low, right? And so it's there's a finite collision probability, but you have to be coming in at the right speed, and because they're going faster, the probability is actually lower as well.
902-405-6000 is the telephone number. We welcome Stephen to the program. Stephen, how are you?
I'm doing awesome for being off for 2 weeks vacation, and now the place that holds my paycheck hostage is wanting me to work.
Oh my goodness!
I know how that feels.
Right.
Yeah, I had a question. So I watch a lot of science fiction, like Stargate and Star Trek and all the other things. And the one thing that I was noticing is sometimes they have these CMEs, and they seem really, really, really bad.
Mm-hmm.
But are they really, really bad? And do we get hit with them? And what do they do to us?
So CMEs, coronal mass ejections, and so the long and the short of it is the sun is fairly inactive, right? So if you were to go and look at, say, red dwarf stars early on in their lives, red dwarf stars can be very active in terms of CMEs, right? And so even though they're smaller stars than the sun, there's a lot of them going off. And in fact, that's one of the key things in determining the probability of life elsewhere in the universe. How often do these red dwarf stars actually have CMEs that impact life on their nearby planets? Because the planets are going to be closer, right, than for the sun, right, because it's lower temperature, so you've got to be closer if you're going to have liquid water. So the sun, on the other hand, is fairly placid. The last really sort of like significant event that we've had that impacted us technologically on a really large scale, I would go back to the Carrington event in the 1869, I think it was. And that really, if that happened again, that would be pretty significant, right? And we would have probably significant damage to a number of grid systems, I would guess. But as I said, people do take this quite seriously. We try and build ways of storing energy and so on, and disconnects. And so I would be hopeful that it wouldn't be entirely disastrous.
Oh, okay. So when I think there was one on Stargate Atlantis where they had to, bump up the shills to keep it. It was so powerful. It was
I mean, like I said, the sun is reasonably inactive. It's going through its main sequence as a G dwarf, and it's not letting these big things out. But that doesn't mean that other stars don't release bigger winds. They do. In fact, we see those happen on a fairly regular basis with even small stars like red dwarfs, which you wouldn't think would be that active.
Now, what kind of damage would that cause?
It's okay. So
or would it irradiate people?
So that kind of damage isn't really what we're too concerned about. What you've really got to be worried about is the level of, unless you're on the moon, of course, where you have no atmosphere, and that's a significant issue because there's significant radiation there. But for us, having the buffer of the atmosphere, what really concerns us is the interaction with the magnetic field of the Earth and how that will interact with technology. Because whenever you have a long piece of metal, right, that stretches over very, very large distances, then as the magnetic field changes, that will induce currents in the metal. And so, yeah, that's really what you've got to be concerned about. The radiation side of it isn't as significant issue for us because we have this wonderful thing called the atmosphere, right, that helps protect us as well as all the magnetic field. Whereas if you're on the moon, yeah, that's significant. In fact, where do we see? So we saw even on Mars, there can be significant amounts of radiation hit the surface of Mars.
Okay, well, that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
All right, Stephen, appreciate it.
Like I said, there's so much fun on science fiction where they paint these things as really bad.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's dramatic. I mean, I'm going to applaud your taste in science fiction because Stargate SG-1 is still one of my favorite all-time TV shows. I love the humor in it, and I love the sort of like makeup of the team and so on. But yeah, if you're going to write a TV show, oh no, a coronal mass ejection, it's not too bad a storyline, is it?
Stephen, appreciate the call. Have a fantastic day. The last word in it is fiction.
Sure.
Right?
But it was a lot of fun.
And that's what it is. It's fun. Yeah. But it's very interesting how science fiction can work its way into reality. I mean, we've seen it countless times that something that was on there. You cannot
discount the importance of science fiction in the growth of scientific knowledge, right? People may say, how's that? But we've got to remember that people are inspired by science fiction to come up with new things. And this is something Shatner did the documentary years ago on the impact of Star Trek on technologies. And so having this scanner that you can just use got people thinking, what could we do? How could we build things that do that? And so It is important. It makes people think. It inspires people, and I think that's very valuable.
This is Science Files. He's Dr. Rob Thacker. I'm Dan Ahlstrand. We're going to take a break. We're back in a few minutes. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. Back after the break.
Axe.
All right, just a few minutes left here in silence for Science Files. The number 902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. Dr. Rob Thacker is here. Dr. Rob, I know we've talked about maritime launch in the Canso spaceport before, but I did see an article, might have been when you were in Scotland, that they had signed a deal with, I think it's a Montreal or a Quebec-based company to build rockets. I think the more important question is why is that area in Canso so coveted as a place to launch from? It gives it a different angle, does it not?
So this is something that when all of the discussion first started, a lot of people who I know were saying, well, Canso, come on, we're not near the equator. We need to be near the equator, right? But the reality is, if you want to send things on equatorial orbits, yes, you would like to be near the equator. But, and I think this is a really important thing to think about, there's a lot of value in having things that actually are on polar or close to polar orbits. There's a very specific orbit called the Sun Synchronous Orbit that basically puts the satellite over the same position every day, which is very valuable for, surprise, surprise, monitoring, right? And so there is a really important argument for actually being able to launch from somewhere that's not right up at the pole, but is sort of like some way down, and we're close to like 45 degrees right here, and then go on a polar orbit, right? And so it makes sense, right? This is one of the things that people were surprised by when I first sort of like wrote this up. They said the physics works. It makes sense to launch from Canso. You're going south over the water, and so from a safety perspective as well, although people might say, what about the fishing boats? Get it. And it makes sense to actually launch from there to put things on sun synchronous and polar orbits. And so that's been essentially the business case for it, right? And so you can still put something on a polar orbit if you have a big enough rocket, because what you actually have to do is to put it into that particular orbit, you have to burn the fuel to get you there. So someone like Elon Musk with the Falcon 9 rocket, you can still do it with the Falcon 9. Your payload becomes restricted, though.
Because the fuel's so heavy.
It's all about the fuel cost, really. I mean, when you're launching a rocket, the heaviest thing you're carrying is your fuel, right? And so that's what makes rocketry kind of inefficient in a funny kind of way. Right, so that's why everyone talks about antimatter being the perfect rocket fuel, because it doesn't weigh very much and you get a ton of energy.
Back to Star Trek again. Careful.
Yeah. Oh, the dilithium crystals, they ain't working, Captain. So anyway, and so with chemical rockets, though, you've got to carry your fuel. And so it makes sense from a physics perspective to launch from Canso. And so the challenge is if you have other players in the game who can still put things on polar orbits for a comparatively low cost, this is the thing that Falcon 9 does very well. It's a very low-cost way to get into orbit. And so the challenge for MLS as sort of like a business venture is to find enough basically launch companies that want to be able to launch from there on sun synchronous orbits at the costs that they can provide. And I think that's the real challenge. It's a little bit unfair to sort of like criticizing it as sort of like, oh, it's something happening in Nova Scotia, it doesn't make sense or anything like that. I don't think that's a fair analysis. It does make sense from a physics perspective, or the social and other issues are a whole different kettle of fish.
Right.
Let's take those off the table in this particular case. But so your key thing in making this all work is to find enough companies that want to be able to launch, have the launch vehicle as well, because obviously the Ukrainian interests that were originally involved are now being essentially removed from the project. There's all sorts of issues that we all know about that force that. And so now MLS really has to find enough sort of like mid-sized players. I don't think this is ever going to be a big place for launches that are actually able to launch. And so with Canada never having had an orbital platform, we have been able to launch rockets into space for a long time. There was a base up in Churchill, Manitoba that did that, right? And so, but having something that was able to launch to orbit is the key thing to make this financially viable.
And you mentioned earlier in the show today that the move into space science, into space exploration is moving from the public sector into the private sector.
Oh, very much so. I mean, the only way this works, as far as I can see, is if there are enough commercial interests for launchers with these particular orbital characteristics at the price that they can provide. I mean, that is the challenge. It's very difficult People sort of like were saying with the particular Ukrainian rocket they were proposing to use, that even then it wasn't clear whether they could get launch costs down to a place that were truly competitive with things like SpaceX. So we'll have to see. I mean, there is something to be said for having an independent launch capability, though, right? I think we need to remember that our relationship with the US is not what it once was. And so having that capability on Canadian soil may suddenly have a much more strategic value than we would normally have put on it, right? That's something to remember.
How much business is out there? I mean, we know that it's pretty crowded up there now. Is this a sustainable industry? Are we going to continue to see a need for people to go to orbit, other than for space tourism, of course?
So that is a really big question that the whole sort of field is literally trying to come to terms with, because we're seeing more and more things put in orbit. The orbital collision risk increases significantly as we do that. And so there is a feeling that we may be pushing things too far amongst certain academic researchers. We had Aaron Boley here last year talking about this as the McLennan Astronomy Lecture. And so there are genuine concerns about this. The industry turns around and says, look, we're very aware of this. We have built new collision detection systems. We are trying to be as safe as we can. And importantly, we're putting things into lower orbits that if anything does go wrong, they come down more quickly, right? So the worst thing you can do is sort of like mess up geostationary orbit. That would be a big mess, right, if that happened. But that's very, very far away, and that's probably comparatively low orbital density, whereas that sort of like low Earth orbit region where you have a lot of activity is always going to be commercially of interest. That's where you can put something and monitor. That's where you can put something and pump data around. That's what Elon Musk is focusing on. And so I think my own view is I think we're going to have at some point a pretty serious accident that's going to cause a number of problems. That's maybe 10 years away from happening, in my opinion. And when that happens, that is when we'll see something like the UN step in, I think.
Is there enough of a demand from private companies? I know we get it. We get the Elon Musk's of the world has his bajillion satellites up there and so on and so forth. But it has to be a finite number of companies that want to put something in space.
You'd be surprised, right? That there is a lot of interest in essentially surveillance, right? And surveillance of whether that's real-time surveillance of things from orbit, right? That is a thing. Obviously, from security perspectives, I won't name names. I was talking to a company, a Canadian company, who was saying, look, a few years ago, all of the intel was shared, and now we have countries in Europe that want their own platform for doing optical monitoring, right? And you can build a relatively small telescope, because that's what they are, put it in space, and literally someone can have that capability for their own nation for a modest cost. And so I think we're going to see a lot more of that just because of, unfortunately, where geopolitics are going.
Right at time, Dr. Rob. Always a pleasure, sir.
Always a lot of fun.
And don't forget, Dr. Rob is here each and every Tuesday for Science Files. So if you have a science-related question, keep it in the back of your mind, and he'll be back next week to answer all of it. Thank you very much to Vanessa Vandenez on the other side of the glass for keeping things in an orderly fashion today. Thank you to all of our guests for taking time out of their day to join us and impart their knowledge. And thank you particularly to you for dialing the numbers, joining the show, and sharing your opinions. You make my day each and every day that you do it. Have a fantastic day out there. Enjoy the sunshine. Pray for rain. Be well, everybody. And remember, be kind to one another.